We're going to wrap up week 11 by talking about high intensity interval training and cross training. So here are the three objectives or outcomes for this lecture. So high intensity interval training, or HIIT. This is where you do short, intense exercise activities. You have a rest period, then you do it again. Then you have a rest period, and then you do it again. This is a very efficient form of exercise because you can basically pack a lot in a very short period of time. It's really intense. And the reason people do it is that it actually provides aerobic benefits, which is really interesting because this seems more of like an anaerobic type thing. And although the benefits seem to be more closely related to aerobic, the reason for these changes or these benefits, these aerobic benefits, aren't well understood. Interestingly, I was looking for pictures and I put HIIT in here and they had this, and so I'm not exactly sure how this is demonstrating it, but there you go. Looks like they're having fun running through a hallway. Looks like it should be in an airport or something. Anyway, when it comes to training, one of the things that you need to remember is that you need to use the principle of specificity. Now, hopefully, all of you, most of you, I believe have taken like the resistance training and the aerobic, anaerobic training class. And if you have it, I guarantee Trevor and Dr. Abbott have talked about specificity. If you haven't had these classes, that's okay too. I'm going to talk about specificity. And in order to kind of maximize your training, especially when it comes to performance, your training needs to basically be designed in a way that will maximize your performance. Okay, and so it's got to be relevant to what you're trying to do. So for example, if I want to run faster, I should run. Like bench press isn't really going to help me that much. It's kind of, the combine just finished for the NFL. It's, where they have all these guys running around in their underwear doing all sorts of different tests that I have always found really interesting because it doesn't really apply. So like, for example, the 40-yard dash, they have these guys train for months to do really well the 40-yard dash. Well, the problem is offensive linemen don't run 40 yards very often, if ever. Okay, but that's something that's very important, or at least they've decided is important. And every once in a while, you get a guy like that happened this year that was 330 pounds and he runs a 4.8 or 4.7 or whatever it was, which is just stupid. But like that's really irrelevant. And so when it comes to training, you want to do things that are going to benefit you. And even if you think about on a team sport, what every position does is going to be different. Like an offensive, defensive lineman, they're going to do different types of training compared to a quarterback or a wide receiver or stuff like that. And this is all comes back to the specificity. And so tying this back to aerobic training, because I can't let it go, VO2 will actually be higher in someone doing a max test in the sport that they're training for. So for example, if you have a rower and you have them do a VO2 max test rowing, they're going to score higher on that than they will probably doing cycling or running. And the same is true for all these other sports, or likely true. So what happens is when you train, these motor units become trained, and you're actually training specific muscles and specific motor units. And so this causes specific cardiorespiratory and metabolic changes. And these are things that we talked about in the last class period, where we're talking about limitations to cardiovascular or to VO2 max, right? So you're going to have certain changes in your respiratory system or your cardiovascular system, or even within your muscle. I find it fascinating that, like it says here, when the motor units that are involved in aerobic activities are going to increase the amount of oxidative enzymes they have while decreasing the glycolytic enzymes. And so this is going to allow these motor units to better use oxygen. But the flip side is they're not going to work really well when it comes to anaerobic conditions because there's not oxygen and they're not going to function as well. So this leads us to cross training. And so this is where you train for more than one sport at the same time. So you could think about it if you're training for a triathlon, or you're training multiple fitness components. So maybe I'm trying to increase my endurance while also increasing my strength or increasing my flexibility. So an aerobic example is a triathlete, right? They're doing run, swim, and cycle. And then anaerobic would be someone that might do some resistance training while also doing HIIT. Okay. Now, there's definitely benefits to this. One, it kind of mixes things up. Two, it also is a way to kind of improve your fitness, but give your muscles a break, right? And so, like, if I run every day, 7 days a week, that's gonna put a lot of stress on my body. But if I run 5 days a week and then swim 1 or 2 days a week, those days that I swim actually are going to be really helpful in the recovery process. Now, there are some issues potentially with cross training because there just are. So when you train for endurance and strength, you can increase both, but the amount of strength gains that you'll experience are going to be diminished compared to if you just did strength training alone. And so it's you want to try and find that balance. And so ending week 11, are you able to do these 3 things after watching this lecture?